I had always seen myself as a rational person. Growing up in the small town of Haddonfield, New Jersey, I preferred the predictable rhythms of life. My job at the local library, quiet evenings with a book, and the occasional hike through the nearby woods. I thought I was grounded, but everything changed on one fateful autumn evening when I stumbled upon something I was never meant to find. It began with a smell, something rancid, like a small animal left to rot. I was on one of my usual trails, the leaves crunching underfoot, accompanied by rustling branches and distant birds. But that odor lingered, heavy in the air, making my stomach churn. Curiosity overcame my better judgment, and I followed it. As I walked, the trees closed in around me, their gnarled branches forming a lattice overhead. The light began to fade, casting long shadows that danced unnaturally as the sun dipped below the horizon. I could hear a faint trickle of water nearby, but it was drowned out by an unsettling silence, as if the world held its breath. When I finally found a clearing, I was struck by the sight before me. At the center lay an abandoned cabin, its shingles warped and peeling, windows shattered like broken promises. The rancid smell was stronger here, mixed with something metallic like fresh blood. Compelled by an inexplicable force, I stepped closer, despite every instinct urging me to turn back. Pushing open the creaky door, it groaned in protest, as if warning me to leave. Inside, the air was thick and stale, carrying a faint hint of mildew. Darkness enveloped me as I stepped over debris, broken furniture, shards of glass, and what looked disturbingly like fur. A shiver ran down my spine, that primal instinct whispering about danger. Yet, I pressed on. The draw of the unknown was too powerful. Suddenly, I heard it, a low, guttural sound reverberating through the cabin. It was rhythmic, like the growl of a creature deep in slumber. My heart raced, drowning out all other noise. I hesitated, torn between fear and fascination. What could be inside? I edged further, my foot crunching down on something too soft. Looking down, I recoiled, a small matted thump of fur, clearly a small animal's remains. My stomach twisted as I fought to suppress the bile rising in my throat. With renewed urgency, I crept toward the sound, heart hammering in my chest. It came from a door at the back of the cabin, slightly ajar, an ominous invitation. I pushed it open, and the air hit me like a wall, sour and thick, almost suffocating. The sound intensified, a grotesque symphony of labored breathing, punctuated by whispers that curled around my mind. In the dim light, I could make out shapes, crude drawings scrawled along the walls, depicting a ritual, grotesque figures dancing around an unseen entity. A cold sweat broke out across my forehead as I looked closer. The figures bore twisted expressions, mouths agape in silent screams, eyes wide with terror. Then, I saw it. A shape, huddled in the far corner. It was wrapped in tattered fabric, matted with dirt and blood. I could see the outline of an arm twitching erratically. My instincts screamed at me to flee, but I stood frozen, paralyzed by dread mixed with an inexplicable urgency to understand. As if sensing my presence, the figure grew still. The whispering ceased, replaced by a low hum resonating through my bones. I took a step back, but my foot caught on something and I fell hard against the floor. The sound erupted again, now louder, as if angry that I dared intrude. In that moment, the figure turned, its face obscured by shadows, but I felt its gaze bore into me, heavy and suffocating. It was as if a blanket of despair wrapped around my chest, squeezing tighter. The taste of copper filled my mouth, and I struggled to breathe, feeling the air leave my lungs in short gasps. I scrambled back toward the door, but it slammed shut as I reached for the handle. Panic surged through me. The whispers returned, now a cacophony of voices, each more frantic than the last, echoing my fears. I pounded on the door, but it wouldn't budge. The hum escalated into a deafening roar, overwhelming my senses. And then I felt something cold brush against my arm, a hand, or what felt like a hand. I turned, and the figure was suddenly right there, its eyes glinting in the darkness, filled with anguish. It reached out, fingers trembling, and I realized too late it was not asking for help, it was drawing me in. I woke up later, sprawled in the clearing, the cabin nowhere in sight. The sun had fully set, and the forest loomed around me, shadows stretching longer than they should. I stumbled back toward the path, heart pounding, wondering if I had imagined it all. Yet the smell lingered, a sickening reminder that I was not alone. In the days that followed, I tried to forget, but the whispers remained, shadows creeping at the edges of my mind. At night, I could still hear that low hum vibrating through the walls, and sometimes I felt a cold touch on my arm pulling me back toward an unseen darkness. I don't know what I saw that night, nor do I wish to find out again, but every time I pass the woods, I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched, that whatever lurked in that cabin is still waiting, forever whispering my name.
I grew up in a small Midwest town where everyone knew each other's business but avoided discussing their true fears. My name is Lucas, and I was always the curious one, the kid who explored the woods behind my house, chasing shadows and whispers. As I matured, my thrill for exploration transformed into a desperate quest for something beyond the ordinary, an adventure that ultimately led me to confront something far more sinister. It began last autumn. The leaves crunched beneath my feet as I ventured deeper into the woods, drawn by the scent of damp earth and decaying foliage. I stumbled upon an old shack, hidden well past the tree line. Locals had whispered rumors about it, tales of strange sounds and lights at night. My heart raced with a mix of fear and excitement as I stood before the dilapidated structure. The wood was splintered, a deep gray, and the musty air made my stomach churn. As I stepped inside, the floor groaned ominously under my weight. The stillness felt suffocating, interrupted only by the rustling leaves. But there was something else, a barely perceptible humming that vibrated through the air. I paused, attempting to locate the source. It felt like a pulse, sending a wave of unease through me. The shack was empty, except for a few broken pieces of furniture and a mirror hanging crookedly on the wall. I approached it, feeling an almost magnetic pull. My reflection stared back, but the edges around me began to blur and darken, as if shadows crept in from the corners of my vision. The humming intensified, and a chill skittered down my spine. I could almost hear whispers, words I couldn't understand, wrapping around me like a shroud. I turned away from the mirror, heart pounding, but as I did, I caught a flicker of movement in its glassy surface. I froze, breath hitching in my throat. The reflection was no longer just me. Behind me stood a figure, indistinct and shadowy. I whipped around, but the shack was empty, just silence. I backed away, the stench of mildew growing stronger, mingling with something metallic. My pulse quickened as I reached for the door, but before I could escape, the air shifted. The humming morphed into a low, guttural growl, reverberating through my bones. It felt alive, hungry. The floor creaked again, and I glanced down to see dark stains pooling beneath me, dried and caked on the floorboards. Disgust surged through me, and I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a rusted nail. I sensed an instinctual urge to flee, but another part of me felt rooted in place, as if the shack itself held me there. I turned back to the mirror, and this time the figure was closer. It was a woman, her eyes hollow and unseeing, mouth twisted into a silent scream. I couldn't look away. Her despair pulled me in. The humming grew louder, drowning out my thoughts. It was relentless, a cacophony resonating deeply within me. Suddenly, the whispers grew clearer, a multitude of voices merging into a single piercing cry. "Help us," they begged. I felt their desperation clawing at my consciousness, and in that moment I understood. I was not alone. The shack had been a prison, a holding cell for souls torn from their bodies, begging for release. Panic surged through me, and I fled, bolting for the door. The moment I crossed the threshold, the whispers turned to screams, echoing in my mind as I stumbled into the cool air outside. I gasped, lungs burning, and the world felt too bright after the dark confines of the shack. But as I turned to run, the ground trembled, and I felt something cold grip my ankle, a sensation like ice tightening, pulling me backward. I fought against it, kicking and flailing, but whatever had me wouldn't let go. I could hear the whispers again, now frantic, desperate to drag me back into the darkness. My heart raced and I screamed, wrenching free and sprinting away, the forest a blur around me. I didn't stop until I reached home.
slamming the door behind me, locking it tight. Even then, I could still hear them, the whispers, the cries, echoing in my mind, relentless and unyielding. Days turned into weeks, but the feeling of something lurking remained. Whenever I closed my eyes, I saw her empty gaze, her silent scream. Nights are the hardest. I can hear them crawling into my dreams, their voices swirling around me, lacing my thoughts with dread. Sometimes I think I can still feel that chill in the air, the grip of icy fingers around my ankle, pulling me back. I fear sleep. I fear the darkness. But I know one thing. They are still there, waiting, whispering. And I dread the moment they decide to drag me back into the shack, where the whispers will become a deafening roar, and I will join them forever.
I've always seen myself as a logical person, the one friends call for help with their irrational fears, armed with facts and statistics. Yet here I am, recounting something that defies every rational thought I've ever held. My name is Mark, and this is the night everything changed. It all began with an unexpected phone call from my childhood friend, Alex, who had inherited an old house in a small town in Maine. He invited me to help clean it out before he moved in. The house was a Victorian relic, with peeling paint and creaking floorboards that seemed to breathe. Inside, the air was thick with mildew, old wood, and a faint metallic scent that clung to my nostrils like a ghost. On our first night, we worked late, the only sounds being the rustle of old newspapers and our shuffling feet. The overhead lights flickered, casting strange, dancing shadows along the walls. I joked about the place being haunted, but Alex shrugged, his eyes darting nervously toward the dark corners. Eventually, we decided to call it a night. As I lay in the guest room, the silence felt heavy. I strained to hear the usual sounds of the outside world, crickets, rustling leaves, but all I could hear was the dull thud of my own heartbeat. Then came the whispers. They started as soft sighs, almost like distant conversations. I sat up, straining to listen, but the words slipped away like smoke. When dawn broke, the whispers faded, yet a lingering unease settled in my stomach. I tried to shake it off, but the metallic odor seemed stronger. After breakfast, Alex suggested we explore the attic. Hesitant at first, I was eventually overcome by curiosity. The attic door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling into darkness. A musty smell emerged, thick and suffocating. The air felt colder as we ascended, wrapping around us like a damp cloth. At the top, a single bulb cast long shadows, sending a shiver down my spine. In the corner stood an old, dust-covered trunk, locked tight. While Alex fiddled with it, I examined the walls, lined with faded photographs of unfamiliar faces. Their hollow eyes seemed to follow me, accusing. Turning back to Alex, I noticed he looked paler, his hands trembling. "Mark, I don't think we should..." But just then, the trunk let out a loud crack as it burst open. I turned just in time to see a swarm of insects pouring out, their tiny bodies glistening in the dim light. I recoiled, stumbling backward into a wall. The insects moved like a living carpet, a writhing mass of legs and wings. Horrified, I watched as a larger creature emerged, a grotesque, twisted thing resembling a human face, contorted and unrecognizable. Its sunken eyes and impossibly wide mouth released a cacophony of the very whispers I'd heard before, swirling around us in a dreadful chorus. In a panic, we turned to flee, but the doorway seemed to close in. The whispers grew louder, ringing in my ears. I felt a heavy presence behind me, suffocating me. A cold breath brushed my neck, paralyzing me with fear. "Mark!" Alex shouted, snapping me back to reality. We stumbled down the stairs, desperate to escape the attic's grip. Bursting through the front door, the outside air felt like a balm, but the whispers still echoed in my mind. We left the house that day, but the feeling never truly left me. Days turned into weeks, and I returned to my usual life, yet I felt the weight of that attic looming over me, always lurking at the edges of my thoughts. The metallic odor clung to my clothes, and I often glanced over my shoulder, expecting to see something watching me. One night, lying in bed, I heard the whispers again, faint but unmistakable. They beckoned me, a siren song promising understanding and release. I fought against the pull, but found myself drawn to the sound. Heart racing, I drove back to the house, unsure of what awaited me. Standing outside, the moonlight cast an eerie glow over the worn facade. A chill ran down my spine. The whispers grew louder, wrapping me in a cocoon of dread. I stepped inside, the door creaking shut behind me, sealing my fate. As I climbed those stairs again, darkness swallowed me whole, leaving only echoes behind, a chorus of lost souls waiting for their next visitor.
I've always been a skeptic. Growing up in a small town in Ohio, I dismissed the ghost stories my friends shared. I preferred the mundane, the comforting hum of everyday life. My routine was simple: wake up, work at the local diner, come home and unwind with a book. But everything changed one summer night when I took a detour on my way home from work. The air was thick with humidity as I drove along a winding back road I had never explored. An unsettling fog hovered just above the ground, swirling like ghosts in the fading light. I could barely see 10 feet ahead, yet something compelled me to keep going. Perhaps it was the thrill of the unknown or the hope for an adventure that would shatter my monotony. I turned off the main road onto a narrow path where the trees closed in like a grasping hand. The car's headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating twisted trunks and vines that seemed to reach for me. As I drove deeper, the air grew colder, and the smell of damp earth filled my lungs, a rich, moldy scent that made my stomach churn. Suddenly, I spotted a flicker of light in the distance, pulsing like a heartbeat. Curiosity gnawed at me. I parked the car and followed the light on foot. Each step felt heavy, as if the ground were urging me to turn back, but I pressed on, my heart thudding in my chest. The light led me to an old, decaying house, its windows shattered and walls sagging like the bones of a dying beast. I was drawn in, the light flickering from within the darkness. The door creaked open, inviting me into an embrace I should have feared. Inside, I was met with a stench that turned my stomach. The air was thick with rot, but it was the faint, sweet scent of something else that really disturbed me, like flowers, but wilted and decaying. As I stepped inside, the floorboards groaned beneath my weight. I glanced around, noticing remnants of lives once lived, an overturned chair, a torn photograph, and dust motes dancing in the slivers of light that peeked through broken windows. My skin prickled as I felt eyes on me, the sensation crawling across my back. "Hello," I called, my voice wavering. The silence that followed was deafening, but then came a whisper, soft and urgent, like rustling leaves. I strained to hear, my breath hitching in my throat. The words were indistinguishable, but they beckoned me deeper into the house. I followed the sound down a narrow hallway, my heart pounding. The floor was sticky beneath my shoes, and as I looked down, I realized it was not just dust, but something darker, something that glistened in the low light. I recoiled, but the whisper grew louder, drowning out my fear. Turning the corner, I stumbled into a room that felt wrong. The air was electric, almost crackling, and the walls seemed to pulse with an unknown energy. At the center, a dim light flickered from an antique lantern, casting chaotic shadows. That's when I saw it, a figure in the corner. It was a woman, her back turned to me, long hair cascading down her back like a waterfall of night. She stood eerily still,
but the air around her shimmered, distorting the space. A sense of dread washed over me, yet I couldn't look away. I wanted to scream, run, but my body betrayed me, frozen in place. "Help me!" she whispered, her voice barely above a breath, yet it echoed like a thunderclap. I felt the temperature drop further, an icy grip wrapping around my lungs. My instinct screamed to flee, yet I was drawn to her, compelled to unravel her sorrow. "What happened to you?" I managed to whisper, my throat dry. Her head turned slowly, and I felt my heart stop. Her eyes were hollow, dark voids that seemed to suck in the light around her. "Help me," she repeated, but the urgency was gone, replaced by something worse: resignation. The lantern flickered again, and for a fleeting moment I thought I saw the outlines of hands reaching out from the shadows, grasping, clawing. I turned to leave, but the door slammed shut with a force that rattled my bones. Panic surged through me. I rushed to the door, yanking on the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers rose to a cacophony, filling my mind with desperate pleas and mournful wails. The walls seemed to close in, pulsing like a living entity. In that moment, I felt dread wrap around my throat. I turned back to the woman, but she was gone, replaced by writhing shadows that twisted and contorted. The room was no longer just a room. It was alive, hungry, and I was the prey. I screamed, the sound tearing through me, but the shadows roared back, drowning me in darkness. I clawed at the door, but all I could hear were the whispers, drawing nearer, and the lingering scent of decay mixed with sweetness. And then, without warning, everything went dark. I woke up in my car, drenched in sweat, heart racing. The sun was rising, casting a dull light over the fog that still clung to the trees. My hands trembled as I gripped the steering wheel. Was it a dream? But then I noticed something in the passenger seat. A wilted flower, its petals blackened and decayed. An overwhelming sense of dread washed over me. I wasn't alone. That sweet, sickly scent lingered in the air, and I felt a cold breath against my neck. I started the car and drove away, but as I glanced in the mirror, I could have sworn I saw her standing at the edge of the road, her hollow eyes watching me fade into the distance. I haven't been back to that road since, but every night I smell the flowers, and I feel her presence hovering just out of sight, waiting.